Get my lenses in for this bit.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Dan. You all right?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Not so bad.
I'm glad you managed to join. Hopefully that means everyone else can.
It's working.
Right, I'm going to share screen as well. Tell me if you can see.
I have. I got the splash screen for the South East Wales.
You've got a screen up, have you?
No, not at the moment. Ah,
Okay, right.
It's coming now. Got it now.
Great. And now, got PowerPoint.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then if I do, where are? There we go. And then if I do this, you should be able to see. Oh, it's interesting. It's having to reload. Sports Track Live loading up.
It's your super slow Welsh internet.
I think you're probably right. Yeah. It was all preloaded, so hopefully, let's just check this one's alive as well. It's rebooting as well. Right. Well, at least we found out now. hit record there. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And hopefully everybody can see that screen okay as well. Everybody can see the front page of a PowerPoint. Yes?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, right. Good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for joining this evening. This is obviously as advertised, Dragon Hike and Fly 2025, and a run through of the Sports Track Live replay. And I think possibly taking away some pretty decent learning points as well from this one, because we had the participation of a couple of very good European pilots to compare ourselves to too. So a quick overview of what we're going to do. As before, we'll just have a quick look at Hike and Fly basic principles as we've come up with. Ali's not going to join us tonight, but I've spoken to him and he's given me his thoughts on the planning for the task. We'll have a quick look at the weather and the terrain that we're going to be passing. We'll just have a quick look at the principles and then we'll go to the race replay. And we'll run through that. Initially, we'll be looking at the pros. So our finishers 1 and 2. Then we've got a few other examples to look at. I'll open the floor and there might be other things I've missed, which sometimes happens. You might spot things that I haven't seen and we want to talk about. And then we'll conclude and see what we can draw from this race. So first off, for those who haven't seen this before, or a recap for everybody else, this is a format for planning a day that we sort of hashed together. We're saying that there's 3 components to the day: the weather, the terrain, and yourself. Within the weather, we're looking for key times for the day to generate a schedule. The terrain, we're looking for sites, access, aspect, crux points, dangers, what we're going to be passing over the top of. And then on the ground, yourself, and we're looking at how fast you can move on the ground, how you are in the air, and also things like your food, water support. From that, we can then generate a plan for the day. So split into 3 parts, part 1 being the start of the day, part 2 being the most important part, which is the flyable part, and not necessarily ridge running. You're probably ridge running in part 1 and part 3, but this is the XC portion of the day. This is a point of the day when you're going to use thermal flying to cover some ground. And then part 3 is the end of the day, whether it be finishing the race or positioning yourself for the next. So to start with, I spoke to Alistair and he gave me a quick run through of his thinking when he came up with this task design. He said he designed it to be completed in 1 day by the elite guys. Obviously, he was aware of the quality of some of the Hike and Fly pilots that were going to be attending this year. He wanted to provide plenty of opportunity for flying on the 2nd day. So hence, he took advantage of the forecast on day 2 to allow people to fly. And we did see people putting in some very good flights as well on day 2. I know Tom Garner's on at the moment. He was one of them. He wasn't sure how much wind there was going to be and how early it would come into the hills. And obviously wind was a big factor in this race. He wanted to break up the pack as a result of this. He didn't necessarily want the beginners or low experienced pilots to see the more experienced pilots flying in the Black Mountains in conditions that maybe weren't appropriate for them. Hence, and we'll look at it, we've got these 2 western turn points, which split up the pack quite dramatically at the beginning. He also acknowledged that if you were early enough, you could fly to goal on day 1, which is linked to point 1. And he was also thinking about people who are vol-bivving and staying out for the night. He wanted them to be in a part of the Black Mountains that would provide them with good opportunities for camping, water, and supplies. So that was his thinking for the design of the task. We look at the forecast then. This came from his PowerPoint presentation when he generated the race. Fine weather was forecast, but the most important part for all of us was this wind forecast. So easterly, I think I should probably say becoming southeasterly, 10 to 15, gusting 20 to 25. And when you're looking at the mountain area forecast, generally on top of the hills, it's the gusting component is going to be what you see fairly consistently. This is SkySight, something Ali uses a lot as well to forecast the day. And there's quite a difference between this and other forecasts on the wind strength. This is in meters per second. Sorry, that's climb rate. Where's this wind speed? I can't remember whether this is kilometers an hour or knots. But anyway, we're not looking at particularly strong winds at about 3,000 feet here. So a bit higher than us, but obviously much lighter winds than we experienced, but also more importantly, showing us the portion of the flying day. So from this, we can see at about 13:30, the day starts and it sort of tails off again. Got this little bar in the way, down at about 1800, maybe a little later. RASP, however, suggested much stronger winds, which he wasn't hoping for. So there's 2,000-foot line there, so sort of looking at the top of the hills. And really, for most of the day, we were looking, and this is in knots. These wind arrows, it's saying 25 to 30 knots over the top of the hills, potentially. So RASP was more pessimistic about the day. And I think realistically, we probably got somewhere between the two. And then this is our task, if you might all remember well. So there's our start at the campsite, 2 turn points out here. These are the 2 western turn points Alistair said he put in to try and break up the pack a little bit. And then we started to work our way across the Black Mountains out towards Pandy Ridge Line. So the Pandy landing field, which is obviously our land at, and then a Skirrid back over Magic, end of speed and into goal. So that's our terrain portion there. So we've got winds, if you can see the cursor, which are forecast to be easterly, turning to southeasterly. Lots of ridges that run fundamentally north-south, so easterly facing ridges, but maybe a little bit of a turn, especially Pandy, that takes more of a northeasterly. So if we come back to the analysis then of the day, we can generate some times. So from what we've seen, an audience participation welcome as well. When do we reckon the most important part of the day, the second part of the day, is going to be starting? Anybody can shout out. Cool, there you go. So I've said, from my analysis of it, that the first part is between race start at 9 a.m. to 1300. We've got 4 hours, and then we've got this period from 13 to 18:30, about 5.5 hours where it's thermic, and we could be considering thermal flying. And then the end of the day, 18:30 to 2100. Obviously, we're still flying in these portions, part 1 and 2, but they're ridge running. It's not necessarily thermal flying or top to bottom sled rides. So with this information, we can identify our takeoff location and the focus of part 1. And in this race, a lot of part 2, I think, was to get ourselves into a position to actually take advantage of that flight. Being patient is something we've talked about before, and we see people where they rush off a hill when maybe they should wait. But even in this race, it was, well, I don't know. We'll have a look at the way the Europeans flew it. Being patient was important when you got to your cross-country takeoff site, wherever that happened to be. But otherwise, you just need to keep on moving. And then that comes down to the speed. So part 1, realistically, if I go back, if I bring up the task on here. Here we go. Realistically, our cross-country potential was over here. So we've got Pandy Ridge Line, and most importantly, Skirrid for 20-kilometer downwind back to goal. The rest of this course line was into wind or ridge running, but with a forced landing at the end of it. So with that in mind, we're saying we've got this period to basically get as far east as we can to take advantage of the thermal flying to get back to goal at the end of the day. And this is kind of what this whole brief's focused on, is how you complete this in one day. A lot of the replay, unfortunately, is just day 1 because that's how the track logs have come across as well. But there's a lot to be learned from that. Any questions on what we've put in there, or anybody disagree with it or have any other points? Right, so the bit we all want to see then, with that in mind and our windows that we're aiming for, we can go to race replay. So I think we'll start with 1 p.m. because that's what we've identified as the start of that part 2, the thermic part of the day. And we'll have a look to see where the majority of the field have got to. So this is Sports Track Live for anybody who's not familiar with it. If you look at the top with the cursor, you can see which way I'm orientating it. I'll generally try and put it back to north so we know we're looking to the north. Over here, you can see the pilot I've got selected, and down here under the cursor is probably one of the most important parts. That's a timestamp, so you can keep track of where we are in the day as well. Obviously, I can zoom out, pan, hit play, and we can watch how we move around. But this is at 1 o'clock on the day of the race, and you can see how it's already starting to develop. Out in front, we got Noah Court and Jean Morisetti, our two international friends who, as you can see, are flying down Pandy Ridgeline considerable distance already ahead of this gaggle of maybe a dozen. There's a couple of names missing in here. Unfortunately, I couldn't get their track logs on, but there's a good dozen British pilots in here. And then the remainder of the field have been really snarled up by these two western turn points. And you see they're just making their way up to the top of the Black Mountains. So just been left behind a little bit. And you can see a very clear divide in the groups there. So that's where we are at 1 o'clock. So it'd be good if someone could turn the microphone on, then just give me a few bits, then audience participation. What happened that day? What was it when we got up to the top of the hills that might have slowed us down? Mark, you're up there with me. You got anything?
Hey, mate. Yeah, we got to the to that reservoir, wasn't it? We saw there was me, you, Bud. Was there someone else as well?
Yeah, we had Nick Holt with us.
Sorry, yeah, Nick Holt and
then we had Aaron
Greg
Hall
as well.
just launching.
Yeah. So I say we sort of took the decision. It was howling, and we saw one glider fly across the reservoir.
Yeah.
Didn't look like he made great time, so we sort of chatted amongst ourselves and reckon we could run down just as quick, and we did prove that. So I think that was a good choice.
Yeah.
To be fair, because they say we got past him and he was still packing up. So I don't think there was a lot in it there.
No, there wasn't a vast amount in it. You're right. And we can see on this that anybody that actually tried to fly across the reservoir made negative progress, if anything. There were guys who were ahead of us who ended up behind us as a result of that attempt to fly. Yeah, so that's certainly one point. And that was wind, wasn't it? It's howling up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I felt it was blowing 20 plus. I'd say sort of 25 mile an hour estimate, but
yeah, absolutely. So I think that was a big feature of the day. It was very windy up there. It was also a very long way to get forward. Ali put his two western turn points in there to break the group up a little bit, but it did unfortunately hinder a lot of people as well. It just meant it was a much greater distance to actually get out to where it was flyable for most of us. Own capabilities came into it as well, and own limitations. So capabilities, how fast we can move on the ground, and own limitations, you know, just as we were doing, Mark and plenty of others were saying it's too windy to be flying in various parts of the hills. But that's personal, you know. We saw other guys flying, and you know, I got in the air not too much later than that, and it was doable. There's also a desire to fly, so potentially the front guys are flying because of that desire. And also guys getting left behind potentially are guilty of this. They don't necessarily have a plan for the day. They're just going to get on with it and enjoy their day. And maybe time awareness, they're not realizing how long it's actually taking them to progress. So what could we have done? A couple of points: trusting our numbers, watching the clock. And in this race, I think very importantly, we needed to move as fast as we could at the start. And we'll see how Morisetti and Court got on at the beginning. They're fast movers, but that wasn't everything that gave them an advantage. And then I just pose this question: what if we'd all been on Pandy at 1300? And I think we'll see in a bit, had we been Pandy at 1300 with those two, the result would have been potentially quite different. So it's 1300 again. Ooh.
I just wanted to mention, like, it was windy, but also it was bloody hot. So like moving fast required you to like manage yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's no access for support up here either, is there? So once you climbed up into the Black Mountains, you're on your own.
Absolutely. It's find water wherever you can and eat as much to keep yourself going. But to get to those places are far, and you needed to work hard to look after yourself if you're going.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And as we mentioned before, fatigue and the risk that introduces to these races and that desire to fly can introduce all sorts of problems as well. So I think generally in this race, everybody made good decisions. I don't think there were any accidents or nasty scares. Everybody knew what their limit was, which is quite good. So that is that. That's the 1 p.m. snapshot, and we got our 3 groups, we'll call it. So let's now focus on Court and Morisetti and how did they dominate the race. And at the end, I'm going to say they potentially didn't. So let's now, what I've done is I've got a second replay, which is the first 14 pilots, just because it makes the whole render a bit faster and smoother to watch as well. A lot of the track logs, unfortunately, don't start at the beginning. So you'll see a lot of these pins are stationary initially, and then everybody gets moving and it will start going okay. So this is at 10 past 8. If I just zoom from looking from above, the campsite's here. There's our first turn point. There's our second turn point. And here's our third turn point over there. Morisetti's not over there yet. His pin's just stationary for a moment. So this is 10:08, and this is one of the first points to start to look at. And I'm looking at, let's come back slightly, I want to see Court. So we're focusing on Noah Court here, and we'll zoom in on him. So this is him flying off the top, it's a bit broken, and landing. So he's actually landed at 10:08, a bit jumpy there, but he's on the ground at 10:08. And if I hit play on it, it takes him 4 minutes and he's off. So that's 4-minute transition from landing to moving again. And this is somewhere he's never even been before either. He's navigating somewhere he's never been, but he's landed, packed up his wing, and now he's moving on foot in 4 minutes. Now, if I compare that, and this is the majority of the Brits, so I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but Tom Webb was one of the main competitors to our 2 European friends. And we look at his at 10:30. Here we go. So there's Tom Webb down there. And he's landed, and we're calling that at minute 30. Same for Greg, same for Mark, same for myself, Bud. We all do the same thing. 4 minutes has gone by, 38, 39, now Tom's moving. So that's a 9-minute transition for Tom, and that's one of the fastest out of the Brits. Bud, who is also one of the closest competitors, is 10 minutes. So already on that one transition, we've lost 5 minutes to our European friends. And obviously the rest of this has already happened as well. But we just can't really analyze it. Unfortunately, the tracks are too broken, but they've already got a 20-minute advantage. Tom's just started moving. And if we zoom out now and look, here are Noah and Jean on top of our next turn point and on top of the ridge line. That's about a 450-meter climb as well, and about 2.5-kilometer climb. So they've just bitten off a huge advantage over us already. Same thing goes as transitions for the others, as I said. And then we'll start to watch how these two start to move through these hills. And you'll see it differs to the way the British approach it. So if I hit play again, it's all running a bit smoother now. And transitions for these guys to take off, I did look, there you go, Noah's in the air. It's about 5 minutes, no, 3 minutes, sorry, for Noah. It takes 3 minutes from stopping to flying. There you go, he's just flown straight across the valley. I would say these guys have also got the advantage that they've got to the hills earlier than us, and so the winds are only increasing. So they've bought themselves already about 30 minutes here, and they're already launching in lighter winds than we experienced when we got up to the ridge. And you'll see maybe one other, I think maybe Tony Black across this, but everybody else after this starts having to take, or deciding to take, slightly longer lines. So there you go. Morisetti flies across as well, lands up top. See the British pilots now, we're all clawing our way up this hill, and we'll talk about the speed that we move up a hill as well. You know, it's not a spoiler. These guys definitely move faster, but that's not the only place we're losing time over them. So just to get our bearings as these guys move across the Black Mountains, there's the reservoir, which is where the majority of the British pilots crossed. A few guys did come down here and try and fly. Interestingly, Noah doesn't even get his wing out the bag at this point. He decides to stay on foot. And Morisetti, he does. He just takes this flight across the valley. But if I just fast forward now to 12:10, actually, it's worth just pointing out there as well that Tom Webb is in the air, but you see the line he's taken. He's followed the bowl around. He's landed. Really didn't buy him a great advantage, that one. Right, so if I just advance now to 12:10. Bear with me. There we go. So there's 12:10. This is our next turn point when Court and Morisetti are standing just here. Unsurprisingly about to get into the air as well. If you peer down from the top, now the task line, this thing moves, but the task line is that. It's the line that these two have taken. Yet us Brits have only one's flown. Oh no, two have flown. Look, Jacob Aubrey looks like he's flown across, but the rest of us have traversed around. And we're basically doing two sides of the triangle here. The majority of us are crossing over the reservoir either on foot or by flying and then coming down this ridge line, whereas these two have taken one side of that triangle, potentially a shorter line, and a more direct route. And that seems to be their theme. They do take more direct lines than we do. And again, I'd be interested to know what your opinions are on this, whether this is the European pilot in them, or is it because they don't fly in Wales as much and we approach it differently. Maybe we have more of a risk-averse approach to it. But this is now 12:10. Bearing in mind the wind is, well, actually we'll be able to see in a second when they start turning. So Morisetti's in the air and Noah's in the air, and they don't mess around. There's our next turn point. It's Black Mountains South Top, they call it. It's just underneath the cursor. There you go. Morisetti's turning, so you can see the wind direction there, sort of east-southeast, and both of them fly straight at the back of Pandy Ridgeline. So wind's coming over the top of that, but it doesn't seem to bother them too much. They just fly straight at the back of it. And they're not the only ones that do it. You know, we've got Aaron, Bud, Tom, Jacob lands up here as well. So plenty of people do that, and we can look at how they got away with that in a little bit. That will sort of come up once we've finished analysing these guys. But certainly the British pilots, and especially, you know, I was thinking the same thing. You know, I was thinking, do I really want to be flying at the backside of this? I flew into the valley and landed down here and hiked up, but I wasn't aiming to fly to the top of the backside of that hill. But again, I don't know. So that is now our two European friends across the valley. Only one ridgeline ahead. Tom Webb is absolutely smashing along, as is Bud. Aaron Hall's doing very nicely as well. I think Mark and myself are with Bud at this point too. So then if we keep on going, 12:40. There you go, 12:40, that's about right there. They're on to Pandy Ridgeline, and at this point, they're off. And they're off down Pandy Ridgeline. And if you look behind, Bud's in the air. And you'll start to see a couple other Brits starting to fly. There goes Tom. But you can see our two Europeans are now flying down Pandy Ridgeline, and it's 12:50. And this wind, as was forecast, does turn during the day and progressively makes flying this ridgeline harder and harder. And there was a period when actually it made it very difficult for a few of us to do it clean. We ended up top landing, walking some sections of it. But these guys, they were there early enough, so they had the advantage. And there is Noah now in the Pandy landing field. Tom Webb, that's crossed to the back. So he's third at this point. Bud's about to fly. And we'll be landing up here. And we'll also have a clean run down the Pandy ridgeline. So it's still working for them. So they're not a million miles behind, but they are behind. So then, still looking at the Europeans then, we've seen that they've had some fast transitions. We'll look at the speed that they move on the ground in a minute. And they're taking more direct lines maybe than the British pilots. Not dramatically, but subtly different. And if you're on foot, it's making quite a difference. So if we now look at what their next move is, and this is where potentially you could argue they start making a couple of errors. And this is where we'll start to see the British pilots starting to catch up. So at 1350, this is the move that I don't think many of us are expecting. Considering the wind strength, and you're on the floor in Pandy landing field, they both chose to go back up to Pandy takeoff to try and move to the Skirrid. They were the only two pilots in this race to do that. Everybody else chose to do this on foot. But as we've seen in previous years, last year, we saw Dougie do a very similar thing, flying off this hill forward onto the Skirrid, and not many people considered or attempted it. So they've now gone back on themselves. They're fast, obviously.
Just a note on that. I did hear a rumor that they thought that was what they had to do.
Oh, really? So
yeah,
okay. So there's
whether there's
misunderstanding.
any truth in that, I don't know.
Okay. Well, that could explain it because it's a questionable move.
Yeah.
Noah made really good use out of it. I mean, they both did, but it did delay them quite dramatically.
Mm.
Maybe that's what we have to do next year, is just give them some false information. There we go. So just so we can see what's going on. Back down the ridge, there you go. We'll talk about where Aaron is in a bit. We've got Bud and Tom Webb are now flying down the ridge. Meanwhile, Noah and John are flying the Pandy ridgeline. Not working wonderfully at the moment. Eventually, let's go to Noah, then we can catch the important part. But still waiting. This is me fast forwarding it. Morisetti actually gives up at this point and just transitions forward. Noah actually gets a decent climb up to, what is it? 4,000 feet. Yeah, about 4,000 feet, maybe a little more. Oh dear, sorry. There we go. Come back again. Meanwhile, Tom and Bud are underneath him in the landing field. Obviously, that climb then allows him to make this big move to the Skirrid. Morisetti on the floor, but it's obviously a fast guy as well. They've still got the advantage, but they've lost time in doing that. But who knows? It could have been an absolute class move as well. If they'd found that climb immediately, they would have been fine. But if I now fast forward again, and this is something I still puzzle over, and be interested to know what you guys think of this. So at 1500, they're both now on top of the Skirrid, and from the Skirrid, it's 1500, so we're right in the middle of the good part of the day. There you go, Noah's in the air. Right in the middle of the good part of the day. We know it's working. We've already seen Noah climb up to 4,000 feet, and we've got 20 kilometer downwind and a strong wind to make it to goal. Now, I don't really understand this, and it might be the British pilot in me, but I don't see any other British pilots necessarily doing this either. Here's Noah, and if I stay down here, he doesn't actually bother to climb on the Skirrid. He goes over the back of the spine back in 25, 30 kilometers an hour of wind, and you can see he just gets flushed over the back as well. And Morisetti, does exactly the same thing. Now, Noah gets away with it, and he just claws his way onto Dougie's hill. I forget the name of it. And he dribbles with this climb. And ultimately, this wins him the race. He gets away with it. Morisetti, unfortunately, isn't quite as fortunate. He does get away a little bit, but he ends up landing near the base of Magic and having to hike. So we can just follow Noah now in goal. So that's now Magic Mountain in front of us. Can you see this okay? And he just skirts around it. And on to the end of speed. And into goal. So that was him winning the race. There's Morisetti. Hasn't quite worked out for him. He's ended up landing at the bottom near the base of Table Mountain. He actually launches at Table Mountain, as you'd expect a good pilot would. Didn't bother going all the way to the top. Launched at Table Mountain, and then he flew into goal as well. So what I will do now, you see, still on foot. He makes it back in. So I hope that demonstrates their approach to the day. And what I'd do is just come back to PowerPoint now. And we'll look at how did they do it then. So fast on the ground. They are fast on the ground. Then it's more noticeable they're faster uphill. So if you're familiar with this, this is Andy Reid software. You can upload your IGC file onto here, and it will then break it down in about 10 seconds and analyze a track for you. You can see his track actually starts at Minute Troid. It doesn't start at the campsite. And you can see red is flight, black dashed is hiking. So you can see the portions, and this is the portion I talked about where he didn't actually bother flying it, he hiked it. But then from there, we can see how he flew Pandy. This is him on Pandy takeoff, his big climb up to 4,000 feet, transition over to Skirrid, where he just mushroomed it up and kept on moving and took off. His low flight over top of the Skirrid before connecting and then climbing and into goal. So we can use this because if I look at something like that, click on this, you can see, I hope, can you see that black dashed line is pulsing now? So that's the section where he's hiked after turn point 2. So this is now getting up into the Black Mountains. It's 2.5 kilometers long. It's 450 meters climbing. And he's moving at 4.4 kilometers an hour and does it in 34 minutes. I'm going to compare that to, hopefully, Tom Webb, because Tom did a very similar thing. Here we go, same pulsing line. And Tom's not slow at all. In fact, if we look at some of his speeds, he's really moving fast. Same distance, similar climb. He's done it in just shy of 50 minutes. So he's 15 minutes slower going up this hill. He's averaging 2.86. If you look at the other speeds, though, they're not much faster on the ground. So here you go. We've got 7.2 kilometers. They're obviously moving fast, 5.4. If we look at Tom, I think he's got a long hike in here, 7. It's a flight. Where is he? There you go, 3.9, 5.2. So he's moving at the same sort of speed. On the flats and downhill, generally moving at the same speed, but they've got a big advantage on us going uphill. They really don't hang around. They're moving about as fast as we do on the flat. So there is an advantage there. That's personal, you know, what you're actually capable of. Next part is this part. And this is something I think we could probably all work on, is our transition speeds. We also want to be careful about our transitions and making errors. But as I've already mentioned, we've timed Noah on a transition and it took him 4 minutes. I'm going to focus on Bud now because Bud finished 3rd. His transitions were about 10 minutes, so 6 minutes longer. And getting into the air, Noah takes 3 minutes, Bud takes 7 minutes. So it's another 4 minutes. So in all, from unpacking the wing to packing it up again, Bud is losing 10 minutes per cycle over the European guys. So that's something potentially we can all work on. And then the next one is direct lines. They walk straight up the face of the hill rather than contouring. I don't know what they're using to navigate. They've obviously never been to these hills before, but they're following lines, and they're not worried about it, especially when they're just trying to progress into wind. Next point, I don't know, open to the floor. Who we got on the group here? Let's have a look. Be interested to know from what you've seen. Tom Gardner, we've got Dougie. Good to see you on here. I'd be interested to know your take on that as well, the way that they were approaching it, flying at the backside of hills or leaving hills low. Now I've just said,
certainly the leaving of the hills low. I didn't particularly high when I committed from Curious, but at least I was with the climb and stuff with it. As for the bit during the middle of the day, there's no way I could keep up with that sort of pace on the ground. I was just too late for any other flying.
Yeah. I mean, on the ground, we can't. You know, that's personal, isn't it? It's your physical capabilities. But regarding their flying, are they flying it differently to UK pilots? Are they unfamiliar with the concept of flying behind lee side, like we are, or are we worrying too much, or are they just superior pilots? And are they happy to push into the back of a hill like that or over the top of a spine back? I can't determine which it is, whether they've never flown in the UK or in such. I mean, they're obviously competent. It doesn't seem to faze them that they're flying in these strong winds. But they're potentially doing things that we don't see UK pilots doing. So that's that. Then I said, why did they go back up? Pandy, potentially Mark's answered the question there. Maybe that was a mistake and they didn't realize they didn't have to do that. Why did they leave the skirt so low? Potentially that could have cost them. And if we have a look in a minute, when we view how the Brits got on behind, we'll see, had that been their mistake, I reckon Bud potentially could have won this race, because that was potentially a bit of an error. But they won, so maybe it wasn't. Also, talking to them afterwards, Wales is small to them. The size of the hills is a dot. If we look at the statistics again from Andy Reid's software, up here we can see total. Now it's slightly more than this because it's missed that first climb, but we can say in total they climbed maybe 1,700 meters that day. I mean, realistically in the Alps for them that is maybe 1.5 climbs in a race. So it's quite small for them. So they're definitely fitter on the ground, but they're also making much faster transitions and they're taking more direct lines than us and potentially more gutsy flying. So that is them. Anybody have any points or disagree with what I've said here? Right then, so let's have a look then. Other observations from the race. So that's we've looked at how the two 1 and 2 finished or completed the race. Let's look at route choices then. I've already pointed out that they take a more direct route, and what we'll do is we'll have a look at this is fairly simple stuff potentially. Where are we? There we go. Now, a couple of people did this. Marco's the only one I've got on here. But considering this is now looking north. There's the reservoir under the cursor over here. Oh, sorry, there's the reservoir under the cursor over here. And majority of us walk around here. A lot of us walked down past the base of the reservoir. You can see a few guys. These turns here are actually Greg Chilton's turns. He had a really good attempt to trying to cross there, but again, it didn't really benefit him. But then Marco, but he wasn't the only one, decided to walk right around the top of the valley. So an odd route choice potentially, considering the turn points over here. and we can see, you know, that's already a shorter line, but you could potentially have done what Noah Court did, which is this green line here, and it's a far more direct route. So I'm not entirely sure. There's a couple of route choices like this. Aaron, I think you're on here as well. I think you said this was just maybe a bit of confusion. Here we go. This blue line here is Aaron's line. He was in the air. He was flying well. Hello, mate.
Hello, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I think I spoke to you after the race, Thomas. I had a lot of issues with putting my harness on correctly during this race. Of my 4 or 5 flights, I only had it correctly done up once. This was one of the occasions where it wasn't. And with the wind, strong wind, it was blowing me back. My pod was open. It was like a big windsock, and I didn't have the ability to penetrate forwards. And as I was getting closer, I was just getting more and more conscious of I was flying into the lee side of that Pandy Ridge. So I thought the best thing for me to do is run downwind and land on the plateau at Habler, and then get on my feet and run an extra 10k along the top there.
Yeah, which you did.
Which I did, yeah.
I know you mentioned the harness. I didn't realise that was the cause for this as well. So it was more safety than an error, a flying error. Yeah, you know, what you've said, something we've touched on before, is just obviously the heat of the moment and not getting connected up in our harnesses. And if we're going to push for this concept of faster transitions, we're potentially going to introduce more of those errors. So, I mean, thank you so much for telling us that as well. Would you say 5 flights and only had it done up properly once?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, 5 flights. Did it correctly once. The Bogdan Fly harness is the one I've got, and it was new to me. I'd only flown with it twice before this event. And it's got the setting where your leg straps connect to the carabiners and your reserve connects to the carabiners, and it's all quite confusing, and all of the little balls that connect to the loop and ball joints are the same color and the same size. So what I've actually done since then is put a dot of nail varnish on each of the balls, so I know which order to do them up in, and that's a bit more of a fail safe for me for that.
I've come close to buying Bogdan a few times, but I've walked away from it because of the complexity of getting in and out. I just think it's too much still. I don't love my harness, but it's not complex when it comes to getting in and out. So yeah, so you go. Anyway, route choice. Bud's another one though. He's obviously our number 3. This is the turn point here. You can see he's actually flown past the turn point. He's landed high over here, and he's actually managed to take off. So it's not awful. You know, he's making best use of his wing, and he manages to fly this portion as well. But he did. I don't know if it was conscious or not. He did fly past the turn point and go behind it, and then coming back down the ridgeline. So that is our 210 position. So this is now onto sort of the next point on the list, and we can use these track logs here. So we were talking about how are people getting away with flying the lee side of a hill. These valleys, especially Lantoni Valley, is probably the closest thing we have to an alpine valley in the UK. And when it starts to work, when the Black Mountains start to work, you get valley flow. And you can see this by looking at these track logs. If I orientate this north again, so it's southeasterly now. This is northeasterly ridge. It's just flowing straight up this valley now. And so Jacob Aubrey, you can see, has actually just top landed up here. And he's basically hit this face. This looks like bowl, and he's managed to top land this, effectively being on an into-wind face, despite the fact prevailing wind is actually over here. And as we've seen, people are soaring down the Pandy Ridgeline. The valley flow, although it's strong, is potentially pulling the wind locally. And you can see that on these 2 climbs, Aaron's and Bud's. And you can see from where Jacob has landed just there too, that he's on an into-wind face. So this is why people were actually not getting themselves into too much trouble potentially as well by crossing these valleys. And not really experiencing any unpleasant air over the top of Pandy. As the day went on, this ridge started to become harder and harder to fly. There was a period where Tom Webb and Bud got through clean. Jacob got in the air just ahead of me and managed to fly down to Hatterell Hill, which is here, where he had to top land and walk around that corner because it was starting to come around to the south too much. Whether it's my piloting or I didn't have the performance, I ended up having to walk this bit and Hatterell Hill. In fact, it looks like Tom Webb actually walked that bit as well because the wind was pulling around. And Aaron, you stayed on the ground, didn't you, until about here?
Yes, I did. Yeah, stayed on the ground until about Hatterell Hill. Yeah.
So not only have the guys in front got the advantage of speed on us, also the conditions are getting a little bit harder behind as this wind starts to pull around. And I think this is you potentially getting in the air soon, Aaron, potentially on the ground. But yeah, so it's starting to get a little bit harder for us back here. Behind us, people started to manage to fly again. So I don't know if that was just a period of an hour or so where the wind was just being pulled around a bit, or whether it was us. But there was a period there where it got quite difficult. I know it took me an hour longer than I was anticipating to get down the Pandy Ridgeline. So that's the look at the valley flow. Then if we have a look at, it's worth seeing this. So Tom, unfortunately, wasn't as fortunate with his climb out, but he still did what most British pilots would do when we're considering what I was saying the Europeans did. He took a climb off top of Skirrid before he went anywhere. Crossed over to Magic, unfortunately just landed just behind it, which lost him third place. And then this is Bud on his climb out, which is just nice to watch. 3 meters per second from takeoff all the way up to 6,000 feet. Ooh. Far more classic UK flying. If you look at where the Europeans' lines are and where Bud's line is, glide straight to Magic, and then from there he basically connects with what the Europeans have done. And you can see, look, Morisetti has only just landed in goal as well. So this is where we can start to analyze. We're picking on Bud a little bit, but he wasn't far off from these guys at all. Then that was Bud. There's Jacob next up on top of Skirrid. And Jacob gets a nice climb from Skirrid. Again, he makes it to goal off this flight. Then I'm next up there. It's now 5:30 in the evening. I wanted to be up here a good hour before this at least. And I'm struggling to get away from the hill a bit. But I think I get to about 3,000 feet and I go from there, but I only make it 10K behind the hill. And, that potentially is pilot more than conditions, because shortly afterwards, Aaron Hall. Here we go. Aaron took, end of the day now, we're 6 in the evening. We've already identified this about time it shuts down. But look, Aaron's gone over the back in relatively non-active conditions, gets a nice climb. And then, more importantly, still fairly low, he connects up with the Black Mountains and he gets a stonking climb now. I watched him climb out above my head and he makes it. So this is now 6:30 in the evening and Aaron gets a nice climb there into goal. And that is the last of the activity off the Skirrid that day. After then, we've got Greg's already gone. Look, sled right off the end. He was with Nick Holt and Marco. Unfortunately, Marco's track has paused out here, but he actually had quite a nice little flight around the south side of Sugarloaf. But you can see how the day was shutting down really when the majority of the British pilots were getting to it, which is a bit of a shame. So we'd missed that window to make it in that evening. Right, so let's have a look now. So this is now just the bit I wanted to look at. I'm just going to come back to PowerPoint, make sure I haven't missed anything. So we looked at route choice, valley flow, we watched the end of the day there. Sunday, yeah, worth mentioning. I don't have Sunday on here. We're obviously focusing on the guys at the front because we're interested to see how we're going to improve on things. But Sunday was still a flying day. And if you weren't moving fast on the ground, there was still opportunity to fly well. And Tom, you're here, aren't you? You positioned yourself on Skirrid and had this flight the next day. I believe all the way from Skirrid.
Yeah, that's right. I gambled on it becoming flyable and that being my chance to make it to goal.
Yeah.
Knowing that I wouldn't have the speed on the ground to complete it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a do or die gamble on the conditions becoming good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes back to our point of, if you don't know Tom's a very competent cross-country pilot, and it comes back to this part here, be patient. So on day 2, Tom was being patient. He put himself on the skirridge and he waited for the conditions rather than moving off. And sure enough, that's what saw him climb out and fly to goal on day 2. So we're looking at the guys moving fast at the front, but we're also interested in everybody's approach to the race. People who aren't moving as fast, people who just want the adventure and enjoying it, and to complete the task in a pure fashion. And that's exactly what Tom's done. And a few other, I think, Padam, you're on here as well. You flew on day 2 as well, I believe.
Yes, that's right. So I took a glide from Skirrid and then two more flights to the goal.
Yeah. So lovely. It's day 1. You're still moving. You're positioning yourself for day 2, and certainly don't want to be drawing away from the pilots that did that. Unfortunately, the track logs just don't seem to include that portion of it in the replay. Then point 5 I've got here. Would you rather walk 15 kilometers really quickly or 45 kilometers quite quickly? Now, I've said that because, again, if I come back to Andy software, actually, Morisetti walked the least distance, I believe. So I'll just let this load. Hopefully you can see it. Because he flew that portion. We're missing the start of his race. So I've added a few kilometers on, but this clocks him at doing 11 kilometers. Ignore the flying because unfortunately he left his tracker on in the car. So we're saying he's walked 15 kilometers in that whole race. Now I'm going to compare that with myself. I walked 45 kilometers that day. And I wasn't moving slowly in my standards. I was still moving as fast as I could. But if I had the potential to move faster and do what those guys would, I would, because it would save me 30 kilometers on my leg. And you think legs, and you think about a longer race, how much of a difference that makes. You can see on the track here what I'm talking about that struggle that we had going down Pandy Ridgeline as well. So not particularly clean in comparison. And if I just flick through these, you'll be able to see individual tracks. So that's Noah, and you can see the portions that he's flown and the portions he's hiked. Then Morisetti, who actually flew more of it. There's Bud's, so you'll see a portion on the ground. And actually, talking about Bud, he said that he regrets having not flown from that turn point to that turn point, and that cost him. Now, I want to look at Bud because I think he could potentially have won this race if Noah had made a mistake with his flight off the skirrid. And I don't know what happened at Pandy with those guys, but as I've already said, Bud has his transitions are 10 minutes slower than those guys. And so I'm already saying that Bud has made 1 transition to get to there, 2 to get to here, which is 20 minutes. And then he's got another transition down here. That's 30 minutes. So just in the speed that he packs up and gets his kit out, potentially in this one race, has cost him 30 minutes. And if we go back to there we go. There's Morisetti. All right, we go back to Morisetti. Sorry, just bear with me whilst I get my bearings on this. What are we there? There we go. So there is Morisetti flying in. He scratches a bit and he tags the turn point. Now, 16:20. If we zoom out, here comes Bud, and he's only 15 minutes behind the guy. So that 30 minutes lost in transitions potentially has cost him second place in this race. Noah obviously made a clean flight in the end from the skirrid. I don't know how to analyze this dive over the back of the skirrid, whether that's what particularly good pilots do, but it seems risky and potentially could have put him on the ground and made a mistake. And I've looked into the timings here and said that, I'll just get my head around this. So at 13:20, we had, 13:12, Noah left Pandy landing field. He was then in goal at 15:35. So it took him 2 hours 24 to get from Pandy landing field to goal. Whereas for Bud, it took him 1 hour 48. So 35 minutes faster than Noah, the fastest European. So Bud actually and Tom would have done the same, unfortunately, for landing here. Tom would have potentially done the same thing. Bud actually made up 35 minutes on them in this portion. Obviously, the Pandy cost them as well. It really cost Morisetti, put him 15 minutes behind. And just by maybe faster transitions for Bud, that would have got him second place. Because he was, when it came to flying, actually making a lot of the ground. So I don't think necessarily Bud needs to worry too much about this first part. He chose to walk from turn point 1. So I'm trying to show you the cursor. Turn point 1 to turn point 2, because he didn't want to deal with the bracken. There was a lot of bracken, and he just thought, I can get through there faster on foot. And then he flew off. And he's kicking himself about that. I think there's more to be made up in things like transitions, about the lines we took, the shorter lines here through the Black Mountains of the European guys potentially. And I'm not going to focus too much about the speed we move on the ground. On the flat and downhill, I think we're much the same. Uphill, they're beasting us. But again, that's your own personal ability. It's not something to, we might be able to improve it, but it's not the only thing that's slowing us down. And actually into goal, Morisetti, Bud was at 1 hour in the end behind Noah, having been an hour 35 behind him in Pandy landing field. So, like I say, he was making up good distance, Bud. Unfortunately, didn't quite have enough of a race left to catch up with them, and potentially those transitions as a learning point could have made the difference for him, or a difference at least for second place. Does that sound far-fetched, or is that useful, or am I? Okay, good. Right, so let's now, is there anything anybody else would like to look at in this? I've obviously focused a lot on the front guys. I think there's stuff we could learn there, and then the front Brits. Is there anything else that I've missed or anybody else would like to look at in this, or they don't agree with? Do you agree with me? Or fine. So if we start to consider wrapping it up then, to conclude, this is our original analysis of the day. We've seen how it worked out, how this portion of the day was the one that if you got off the skirrid, and as Aaron did, you got that last climb at 6:30 in the evening, you can make it into goal. That was our plan. Time awareness, just to keep you moving on the ground, and then efficiency. And efficiency is really what we've been looking at with the European guys. So their transitions, I'm saying from a full cycle, they're at least 10 minutes faster than us in a race that requires 3 to 5 transitions. That's really adding up. They're taking quite direct lines, potentially more direct than us, whether they're just following an arrow because they don't know the area. And then finally, this portion, the speed uphill. Maybe we can all work on that personally, but we have to work with the legs we've been dealt with. So I wouldn't worry massively about that. It's something to think about, but we can certainly start to think about these items as well to improve our ability, our racing efficiency. So that sort of wraps that up. I want to finish with this. So this is next weekend. We've got the Magic Bash in Southeast Wales. It's being held at Glen Usk Estate. It's 10 quid plus the camping fee, depending on what you want. And that includes, as it says down here, all the entertainment, food and drink as well. So it's a great opportunity for us to get together. Potentially, if you're not familiar with the Black Mountains, to come and experience them. If you want to enter the Dragon next year, or just a chance to maybe come and have a couple more races and enjoy a bit more hike and fly in Southeast Wales. The plan, if the weather allows, we'll have 2 more short tasks. I'm saying about 8 to 9 hours, so starting at 9 in the morning maybe and finishing at 5, 6 in the evening. So we're ready for the evening entertainment. We'll brief and debrief in a similar fashion to this potentially, but hopefully everybody will go out to the hills knowing what they're doing. And we'll include as well, if we've got time and people want it, talk about planning, equipment, local knowledge, and obviously we'll enjoy all that. So I'll leave it there. Any questions or any feedback from anybody, please? You still there?
Just a massive thank you for putting all of that together, because that's not that analysis has obviously taken you an awful lot of time and really gives us all something to think about, and whether
Thank you,
or
Rosie.
not.
Thank you very much. I hope it isn't confusing. I hope it comes across okay, and it's not too jumpy. But I do think there's a lot to be learnt from that race, and it's good to compare ourselves to the Europeans.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for that. One comment I've got on the packing up and unpacking is that it was really windy, and I struggled in the high winds to do that. Slowed me down massively, especially with the packing up in the high wind. It wasn't done very well. So then when I unpacked, I had knots and all sorts. So it added time on and time on again.
Yeah, it
didn't take that into consideration really.
No, you're absolutely right. And the faff I was having with bracken as well, because obviously the bracken was thick, dead bracken. I was having such a faff with that as well. The Europeans obviously did less on foot. They were mushrooming it up a lot more than us. So just picking it straight off the bracken, and I don't know how they launched. I didn't get to see them. They were too far ahead, but maybe they're just throwing it in the air and off they go again. But yeah, it's one we need to be careful about as well. As Aaron has mentioned already, the desire to clip in quickly or pack away quickly can introduce errors. And in the race, we need to be careful about that as well, because obviously we're tired and we want to get in the air, but it can cause problems. So I think we can improve our transitions, and it's something we can certainly look at and maybe look at next weekend as well. But we do need to be careful about it too. Anything else from anybody? I hope it was of use, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've got any comments or feedback, it'd be really welcome if you put anything up in the chat group as well, so people are aware it's going on and that maybe it is useful. That'd be good, just to spread the word that we are doing this. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, and have a very good evening.
Thank you. It was great.
Cheers. Good night.
Thank you, Dan.